Welcome to EdTech Live. Tonight's interview is sponsored by K12computers.com, where you save money when you purchase factory refurbished Dell Optiplex computers for use with Linux. With lifetime technical support from Dell, the Optiplex PC is your best bet for stable and reliable computing. And save $50 when you ask for Dell Optiplexes without Windows XP preloaded. K12computers.com. This is Steve Hargadon. This is a series of interviews that we're doing on open source software in K-12 schools. And we're very pleased tonight to have Mike Huffman from Indiana with us. And joining us a little bit later in the call will be Laura Taylor. And this is an opportunity for us to talk about a very exciting project that's taking place in Indiana and to explore a little bit the use of open source software and Linux in particular in an academic environment. We're grateful for this time. Mike, would you start us by giving us some sense of what you're doing in Indiana?
We are, thank you, Steve, and I appreciate the opportunity, by the way, to talk about what we're doing and talk about what a program that we're calling Indiana Access. And Access is an acronym, as all things are, standing for Affordable Classroom Computers for Every Secondary Student. And what we've done basically is fairly simple. There's no magic here. We simply looked at where we wanted to go. We want to move to one-to-one. We want to have computers available in schools when students need them and when teachers can use them for those teachable moments. And we looked at the money that we had available to do that. And indeed, we didn't have enough money. Big surprise. This is exactly what other states are finding, and it's what everyone has found across the board with multiple laptop projects in Maine and Michigan and other places, that after 2 to 3 years, they run out of money. They simply cannot extend the program any more into the school. And we sat down one day and tried to come up with a way to deal with this lack of money. And it struck us that something that really had never been given a fair test in schools was, number one, the use of really low-cost hardware. Talking hardware here in the $199 to $299 range. And on top of that, open source software. Software that was not associated with a license fee, that would not cause renewal fees to be associated with the schools, that would be high. So as a result of that, we ended up with a pilot program, very, very simple. The first year we actually did 3 schools, and those schools bought their computers off of the Walmart website. And they did not include licenses for software, and we indeed loaded them with Linux. We put application-level software in there, OpenOffice as an example, and others, that we were able to find that might meet the needs of students in the high school level. We started at high school. This is sort of a key element in our program. Many efforts around the United States have started at the middle school level. And in every single one of those efforts thus far, what we've seen is that after a couple or 3 years, the program stops. So in essence, you give a student a computer in the 6th grade. They become very adept at using it. They just as we do on a daily basis, they transform the way they think, the way they write, the way they type, the way they access research. And then when they went into the 9th grade, basically you take it away from them and say, sorry, it was fun while it lasted, but we don't have the money to go ahead and do this at the 9th grade level. So our approach on this, our strategy, was to begin at the high school level and then push the program down. And it is our intention to push it down below high school into the junior high and middle school and also into the upper elementary. But at the present time, our focus is on the high school. Now, we went one step further. Even at the high school level, we said, well, we only have 3 people for the most part, at the state level to support this effort. And we realized that if we did all high schools in the state of Indiana, which account for about 300,000 students, that there is no way under the sun that we could possibly support this effort. We would be spread so thin that it wouldn't be possible. So we decided to focus first on English language arts. We said, let's equip all the English language arts classrooms with one-to-one computers. And these computers, by the way, are desktops at this point in time. They're low-end desktops. As laptop prices come down, we will certainly entertain using laptops. But it is our intention right now. We believe that if we buy a CPU for $299, that in 3 to 4 years we ought to be able to replace that CPU for $150. That's the downward pricing trend on CPUs. So the program becomes, at that point, sustainable. With a laptop today, after 3 or 4 years, we would have to replace the entire laptop, which means spending as much as I did in year 1 to refresh the program in year 4. And that's what we're trying to get away from at the current time. But in any case, we are putting these in English language arts classrooms. The information that we have available on this thus far and the response we're getting from teachers, the incredible part of it is that the word Linux never comes up. What does come up is solid curriculum-based discussions about how effective it is to engage students in this kind of activity. So, if we've taken anything away from the first 3 years of this project, and currently we're in year 4, and year 4 is our first post-pilot year, where we're doing broad expansion in the state. If we're to take anything away from this at this stage, clearly running Linux is not a disadvantage. It simply doesn't come up in discussions. The tool sets that are available, whether it's CMAP for concept mapping, OpenOffice or StarOffice is actually what we deployed, because Sun is kind enough to offer that as a free educational license to schools. And it has more templates and so forth than OpenOffice. Other than that, they're identical. We do use StarOffice, but the discussions that come out of the classroom with the students and with the teachers are curriculum-centered. They are not centered around the software. They're not centered around open source. They're not centered around Linux versus Windows. They are indeed centered around what they were able to accomplish that day and what they were able to learn. So the takeaway is we want to continue keeping this student focused. We want to continue keeping the focus on the curriculum. And in the process, if it's good for the open source community, that's wonderful. And hopefully it will help the open source community start to bring together some of the requirements that K-12 may have that are slightly different from other venues.
So it's interesting to me, Mike, that in some ways you've helped to focus the discussion in a very productive area. A lot of us who are involved in open source software tend to look at this as a choice between open source and proprietary software. But there's a bigger question that I think a lot of schools struggle with, and that is, does technology actually really make a difference in academic performance? And what I hear you saying is, by bringing the cost of the deployment down and being able to provide the computer technology for a sustained period of time or in specific places, that it really does engage the students, and that some of that debate over technology and education can be addressed just by the fact that you're seeing results.
Precisely. And a story that I sometimes tell, we had the opportunity to have a gentleman by the name of Mark Rogers, who at one point was located out of Salt Lake City. He recently changed positions, and I'm not sure exactly what he's doing now, but he was instrumental in helping us to roll this out. He visited one of our schools, and Mark is with Intel Corporation, and they were very interested, and still are, in how open source plays a role in K-12. And Mark talked to the students for probably 35 minutes. And finally, he looked at the class and asked the question. He said, this is Linux. This is open source software. Has that been a disadvantage to you? Has that caused a problem? Have you been able to tell a difference? And finally, the class was unusually quiet. And finally, a student in the back of the room raised his hand, and Mark nodded at him, and the student said, "Yeah, it's you can tell the difference. It's Linux. It's not Windows, but after 10 minutes, it does the same thing." The point being that students are very adaptable. You know, they know web browsers, they know search engines, they know these things already. The fact that it was Linux really didn't play a part in what they were able to get done over the course of the school year. And that is really the key element here. You know, the focus is on the curriculum. The focus is on achievement and learning. And I think as long as we keep the focus there where it ought to be, I mean, that's the business we're in. That's what we're doing. As long as we keep the focus there, I think we can keep those issues in the forefront and make a lot of progress.
Well, I really think that what you're saying provides a healthy perspective to the whole question. And if I'm hearing you correctly, and I've heard you speak about this before, this is really not about whether you're running Windows or Linux. It's just about your financial ability to put the computing power in front of the students. So I'm assuming that if Windows machines were available at the same price, that you would say they could accomplish the same thing?
I believe so, yeah. It is a matter, our model is a cost-controlled model. You know, we have controlled the cost in order to scale the program. And open source provides an ample opportunity for us to control costs. And we find that it performs just as well, performs the same functions, it does the same things. A lot of I might mention this, Steve, because a lot of the total cost of ownership models that are currently out there assume that a large part of the cost moving to open source is going to be retraining. And we've not found that to be true at all, as a matter of fact. I mean, the retraining portion, at least in terms of teachers and students, is almost non-existent. You know, there simply is not that need to have a strong retraining program. I mean, if you learn to drive a Ford, chances are really good you're going to be able to drive a Chevy or a Buick or a Cadillac or a Rolls-Royce for that matter. And indeed, that's what's happening. So those TCO models don't hold true in a lot of cases with what we're doing.
Now, I would imagine, though, that there are other benefits to open source that you are finding, and I've just brought Laura onto the call. Laura, are you there?
I'm here.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks.
So we were just talking about Windows versus Linux and the actual question of cost and total cost of ownership. Mike, what are specifically some of the advantages that you are finding to open source software, though?
Well, first of all, some of the obvious advantages that everyone talks about, and that is they tend to be far less prone to viruses. They tend to be, there's a tendency with open source that allows you to put together a complete system. For example, you can go from the server side to the desktop side and do so in a reasonable manner with content filtering, virus checking, and everything else at a very, very low cost. Open source also tends to be more available and more quickly changed. Updates occur to it on a more regular basis. New features are added. We've also been able to engage in a couple of our projects some local users groups who have had an interest in helping the school, and they've come in and helped the school to arrange specific changes to the software that they needed to make. So everything seems to be available out there. I mean, there are certain premium applications that are not yet available on Linux, but most of those companies are now considering doing that. So there are advantages to open source. I mean, other than its flexibility and availability, it's just something local schools can do.
Mike, of those that are involved, the students, the teachers, the parents, the administrators, you, who's really feeling like the program is a success? Are you getting feedback from all constituencies that are equivalent?
I would say so. Laura may have something to say here too. I think most of the feedback that clearly indicates a success is where we want it to come from, and that's from the students and the teachers. You know, one of the interesting things that has happened in Indiana, and we're seeing more and more of this, is teachers are being reinvigorated. The teachers in these classrooms are truly more engaged than they were. They're excited about what's happening.
And I would really have to echo that. It's I'm getting a lot of feedback here. It's incredibly interesting when I have a teacher call me and say, I went to one of the in-access schools. When is it my turn? When is my classroom going to look like this? In the past, we hadn't heard from other teachers saying, okay, I want to be part of this new change initiative. I mean, that's a really different type of communication from teachers.
So thanks for that, Laura. You know, we had an interview last week with Atlanta Public Schools, who are doing a pretty extensive rollout of Linux Thin Client, and in very similar ways are finding that the low cost of deployment is providing access to the computers, and everybody's getting excited. And you're echoing those same sentiments. Laura, why don't you tell us a little bit about your role, what you do, and give us an introduction to your association with this project.
My role is, and I don't know how much Mike has already gone into. We really work as a partnership in the department. My title is Director of Office of Learning Resources. Our office works with library media, technology, textbooks, professional development, and a lot of the resources that we use with our content areas. And so as this program was being rolled together, we had Mike with his technical expertise, my office, we had our curriculum people to make sure the pedagogy was in place. I mean, it was really a team effort coming so that we were not putting a technical program in that wasn't supporting what we wanted to happen instructionally. So what my office and myself, what we've been working with is how we can best support the teachers to increase student academic achievement, but also student engagement, teacher engagement, sustainability, affordability, repeatability, all of those pieces, and what needs to be in place to make that successful. You know, do we need to be providing leadership training, or is it something other than that? One of the pieces I think that's unique in how we approach this project, in a more historical perspective, when we rolled out a project in the past, we rolled out a very intensive professional development program prior to rolling out the intervention. When we were putting this project together, we really didn't know what it would look like. There wasn't a lot of research out there on one-to-one. There's close to none on high school. So what we did is with our pilot, we put it out there and we said, let's let's come to observe what teachers do naturally, and let's also observe what it is we need to provide to help them move to that next level. And I think what's really been apparent in the rollout in the 46 schools that we'll have this fall, so far 48 schools, is the teachers are approaching it with very different innovations. And part of it is supporting why we are so happy we didn't come in with a planned program. Because what we're finding from teachers is they are doing a lot of things that are innovative that we would not have had the supports. And what we didn't want to do is guide them in one direction. We wanted to see what it is that they're going to use, what the kids are bringing to the picture. And one of the things that we're finding now, and this is what my office is trying to work on, is where do we need to provide supports? We have a lot of schools that Moodle has become just the centerpiece of their initiative. So what do we need to do? We're providing copyright workshops. We're working with teachers on how to use this more effectively. We're working with administrators on how to use this more effectively. So in the past, I would have been able to outline what our department does because we would have outlined a 5-year plan. When you ask me that in regards to this initiative, I can tell you what we plan for the fall. But as we get more response back, we really are responding to wants, needs, and wishes, which is what we're kind of throwing at kids also. And so what we're doing right now is trying to put together a support system for schools to make sure that the equipment is being used to benefit students and teachers optimally, increasing student academic achievement, student engagement, student preparedness, 21st century skills.
What I really like about what you said, and what's so interesting about the way you said it, is that there's just enthusiasm. And clearly the desire to capture that innovation reflects some of the magic that you're seeing, and that's so unique with your program, which is, for years we've had computers in the classroom, but clearly there's a correlation here between the amount of time available and the ability to actually integrate into the curriculum. Now, I'm interested. I read some of the material from your website before setting up the call, and one of the quotes that was so interesting to me was that the teachers were unprepared to have that much computer time.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming that some of your training is just helping them with lesson plans or ways to integrate the computers into the curriculum.
Well, we're using some online writing tools, and we are, working with them in terms of, one of the big initiatives coming out of various groups is the digital age skills or the 21st century skills, a large one being self-directed learning, collaboration, teamwork. And so rather than putting together lesson plans, what we've been working with teachers and teacher groups and administrators on, how do you set yourself up, how do you set your classroom up to do some of these things? If you're going to talk about self-directed learning, are you allowing students to choose what they're writing on? Moodle and online writing software allows students to pick what they're writing, what they're going to write on or write about. So there isn't as much direct professional training, so to speak. There's much more in looking at what the potential of the classroom is. When the teachers found they had a lot more time, and they were finishing up, on Thursday with what they had planned on doing for the rest of the week, one of the teachers spent the week reviewing. And Mike has a great story about that. But it was funny because when we viewed it from our lens, we said, no, you're doing Marzano. You're summarizing, you're note-taking, and you're analyzing, because she had the kids go back and put together their notes for the week, and they, as a group, they went through each of their notes and they figured out where they had gaps and holes and filled things in and then posted them to the web. So if students were absent, they went out and got the notes for the week. And when we had to tell her that she was moving to the self-directed learning, they were collaborating, they were providing teamwork, they were summarizing, they were analyzing. And she didn't put that language with it. She said, no, we're just putting together class notes. But I think that's one of the things that we've become really aware of, that while the teacher may see it as putting together class notes, we're seeing it as incorporating all of these skills. And what we're trying to do is capture some of this to share with other teachers. And what Mike touched on before, I think, is what's truly powerful about this initiative is teachers helping teachers. The capacity building in this project, the tech directors helping tech directors, has been staggering. I mean, they're eager to tell us when they figured something out. They're eager to share with other teachers that they figured out a great use for Moodle, whether, that they hadn't thought of before. Is anyone else doing this? And that, from where I sit, is just truly different. Now, I know this phone call is about open source, but from the teacher perspective, I don't think any of them care that it's open source. We care from a cost perspective. Their tech directors and their administrators care. But I think one of the things that you'll find as you talk to teachers is open source doesn't get mentioned. They don't know why it's a deal. I mean, it's not a big deal to the kids. It's not a big deal to the teachers. It's, tools at their fingertips. It's a big deal when we look at it with, potentially 300,000 kids.
That's, Laura, I was saying that before you came online, and that open source and Linux just doesn't come up. It's what's happening in the classroom.
You guys have balanced each other well there. So what's really interesting about this is that really has given you the opportunity to focus strictly on the cost side. Now, Mike, I was at NECC when you threw some figures out off the cuff that you and I have talked about since, but would you kind of rehearse for our audience the numbers that you discovered regarding cost and where you think this fits in?
Sure. The state of Indiana, the legislature has typically approved about $20 to $25 million a year for technology. Now, that's not been true in the last 5 years, but we've had far less than that. But prior to that, we had about that much money. And the state, of course, receives reports of expenditures from local schools, and we had looked at those many, many times and estimated that approximately $80 million a year was being spent by local schools out of local funds. This is either out of capital projects dollars, where Indiana allows technology expenditures, or out of general fund expenditures. So when I was at NEC and I began talking about this, I added those two together and I said that's $100 million a year. And we did that for about 10 years. The math on that is pretty astounding. It comes up to $1 billion. And $1 billion bought us quite a bit, actually. It bought us some really well-trained teachers who went back to classrooms and never had the opportunity to use the training. It bought us a culture, I believe, of technology, where Indiana schools are not afraid of technology. They're ready and willing to use it once it becomes available. I think it bought us many things, but among the things it bought us was what we currently see in terms of usage, and that's about 35 minutes a week. And Laura and I have traveled to many conferences in many other states, and we've talked about this. And most states will agree that that's about where their time is. It's about at 35 minutes a week or less. Nationally, someone in the National Tech Plan suggested 15 minutes a week. Yeah, I think we do better than that. But that's not much time using a computer and really touching the technology. It's certainly at 35 minutes a week. It's not something we're going to grow to lean on, depend on. So that was kind of stunning to think of it in those terms, in terms of $1 billion expenditure, and we're at 35 minutes a week. If we want to double that to 70 minutes a week, do we look at $2 billion? And so forth. So there has to be a better way to do this. And we think we may have come up with it with Indiana Access.
So in the 46 schools that you've been deploying in so far, are you still focused on English and language arts?
Yes. Yeah, that is the primary focus. And We will be going to the General Assembly this year. One of the reasons it's the primary focus is we only have at the state level $2.5 million per year to do this program. So that's what our current expenditure level is. Instead of $25 million a year, it's 2.5.
And the English language arts is kind of an operational. We have piloted in biology, social studies, and math, but we are operational in English language arts, and that's why our focus is to saturate English language arts, and then to move in a staged deployment through the other subject areas.
So, Mike, you say $2.5 million. I'm assuming that you're not carrying the only burden of this program. Do the local schools contribute? What's their cost in participating?
Well, they are contributing, and what we're doing currently in our grant programs is that we are providing grant dollars for the hardware, for the software licenses for Criterion or Vantage Learning, My Target. And we're providing the basic support for that. They are providing whatever infrastructure needs or whatever infrastructure requirements need to be put in place at the local school. If they need additional electrical wiring, if they need an additional switch to run into the classroom, local schools are picking up that cost.
Well, and from the statistics that you've used, it would seem that they're used to paying 75 to 80% of their technology costs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's nothing really new.
So do you have schools that are not a part of the program that are asking you to get in?
The answer to that question is yes. I mean, Laura can actually tick through the names of them. But we actually have lots of schools who are waiting to come up on the grant list. One of the grants is actually, the order of the grant is determined by assessed valuation per pupil. So it's a set order that changes slightly year to year, but it's a set order. And I mean, we do have people out there going, when can I get involved? Because I want to do this now. And many of those people, by the way, are planning on doing some classrooms on their own just to get started.
We are also using a percentage of our Title II Part D, Enhancing Education Through Technology, grant funds for this project also.
I'm just fascinated. Well, so if Linux really isn't coming up, if the open source side of it isn't coming up and it's just access to the technology, one of the things that I'd read you were doing was having buy-in discussions with faculty, parents, and students. Do you even need to do that anymore? And if so, what do you do in those discussions?
I think we do need to do it. Education overall needs to do more and more of that. I mean, the more you communicate, the better people understand and the more willing they are to become a part of what you're doing. So what we've done is we've gone and talked to parents in a couple of cases. We've talked to teachers in all cases and administrators and told them what the program's about, told them what the expectations are. One of the key elements here is that teachers want to know, how am I going to be judged? How quickly, am I expected to be using these the second week? What is this? And we reassure them that we know it's taking time for everyone to change the way they approach education in the classroom when you have one-to-one computing. So we actually have found that it takes about a semester. It takes about a semester for teachers to become comfortable with the units, comfortable with changing their curriculum that they may have used for years in the classroom to take advantage of the new technology. Once they understand that this is really a student-centered program, it's about access, it's about achievement, it's about performance, it's about giving students and teachers access to quality tools, and that it's not a matter of how many minutes you spend using a computer a day. I mean, although that's a metric that we throw out, it's not something that is important. It really isn't. I mean, it's how they're used. One of our teachers, and this is in the attachment that I sent you, One of our teachers has a quote that is so wonderful. She says, when I first saw computers, I knew I had to have one. I had to have one right now. She said, then I realized that Shakespeare wrote, and to quote her correctly, Laura, what work of Shakespeare did she use? I don't recall. Said anyway, Shakespeare wrote with a quill pen. Said, it's not the technology, it's what we do with the technology. And she has a deep understanding of the fact that the computer is a computer. It's what the teacher and the student do with that computer that makes the difference.
Well, and it sure sounds, Laura, from your descriptions, as though you're working hard to help those teachers communicate with each other so that they can share the benefits of things that they've done that have been successful.
Yeah, I mean, that is one of our big, we had some teachers work with us this summer putting together lessons that they could share, because one of the pieces that we found, we had all these great ideas. We didn't have a lot of pieces out there that we could access, lessons where every student was engaged and possibly doing different things but working towards the same goal. And so we had teachers that currently have 30 ninth graders in a room for 40 minutes doing different things. And what does that lesson look like? What some of the teachers wanted to know is, what should I be looking for? While teachers, I think, have heard a lot that they are to move, that best practices has them moving into a facilitator role, they really wanted to know, what does that look like? And it helps from our perspective. We tend to go to teachers to help teachers, because they're dealing with the fact that you have 30 kids for a 45-minute period, possibly, at varying levels. And how do you serve all kids when you have 5 that might have special needs and 3 that might have been absent for 2 weeks and they have no idea where you are, and all the day-to-day pieces that a teacher deals with in addition to instruction. And so as we've been putting together pieces, whether it be video, whether it be more traditional templates, lesson plans that teachers can adapt so that they may adopt them to fit what they do locally. What we're finding is the teachers are the ones saying, "Ooh, has anybody thought about doing this?" No, send us something. And so it's been very interesting, because and one of the age range and let's go with experience level of the teachers involved in this program is vast. Our original hypothesis was that we would have teachers, because it's for the most part self-selecting into the program, that we would have teachers in that 5 to 10 year experience range. Less than 5 years, they tend to not have the classroom management to take on a new initiative. And then we thought after 10 years, they were kind of out of that. They grew up with technology piece. And what we're finding is our age range is first-year teachers to, I'm trying to think who our most senior teacher in the project is. I think she's, 38 years, Mike?
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Somewhere in there. And what we're finding with the teachers with 25 years plus, they're what Mike spoke to earlier. They're just reinvigorated. They're ready to go. They know their pedagogy. I mean, they know their content area. They understand teaching and learning, and they've been teaching the same Shakespearean works for 35 years. They're ready to approach them differently and to have kids approach them from a different perspective. The first-year teachers are coming in eager, and the more experienced teachers are sharing some of the classroom management that they might have learned in the past year or two with 30 self-directed learners. So I think what's really kind of interesting is if you look at it from a laboratory perspective, I don't think 2 classrooms are doing the same thing. I don't think 2 teachers are approaching having one-to-one access from the same perspective. We still have teachers that are using more traditional methods with their one-to-one. There's hybrids in and all along the way. Not everything is done online. We still have paper and pencil being used with online. And one of the teachers was very clear to me that she doesn't want to ignore that modality for kids that still use that paper pencil modality. She wants to have both being practiced. So they're hyper conscious about not throwing out the old as they adopt the new. And having both available. So kids are just having, as Mike spoke to earlier, just a plethora of resources at their fingertips, an ability to think differently, an ability to do things differently, but not marginalizing one over the other.
It sounds like there's a tremendous amount of balance there. I'm interested on maybe a topical level. Are you finding teachers using some of the read-write web technologies, and how are the schools and the districts responding to blogging and wikis, and are they feeling comfortable with them, or do they still seem to be represent a possible area of danger for the students?
That, I think, is
that's to Mike.
It's an interesting question, and we have a person who is helping us to coordinate and provide support for these projects on a statewide level, who previously was a local school technology director. And he and I have discussed this multiple times, that his original concept on any new project or program like that is we need to find a way to block it. And I think that's pretty common among school technology directors. It's, gee, we need to block this program so students can't access it. I try to have the other approach, and that is we need to find a way to use it educationally. And I think we've done that in some cases with wikis and blogs. I wouldn't say it's universal yet. I think that's a culture change that's going to have to occur.
Well, I'm going to shift gears just a little bit here. It's really hard to look at those the pictures of those desks and not want to know more about them. What can you tell me about the physical desks that are in some of those photographs?
The desks are pretty straightforward. We contacted a number of companies about desks and how we were going to use this, and one company actually got back to us and said, gee, we have one at a price that is within your guidelines, that is a size. They actually sized the desks so we can fit 30 of them in a classroom of 900 square feet. And, those are the desks. I mean, they're glass top desks, so the entire work surface is available for students to use, to work on, to put their books on or whatever. The computer is available to them 100% of the time. So when they need to use it, and one of the stories from the local school is a teacher who was lecturing, and she yelled at one of the kids to stop doing what he was doing. He was playing on the computer. And he said, okay, no problem. This was not one of her top students, by the way. And she walks back toward the computer to see what he's doing, and he said, I'll shut it down, but he said, I was just looking up a word you said. And sure enough, she got back there, and he was indeed looking up a word that she had used in her discussion that he didn't understand. She was just amazed. She said, wow, this is incredible. Now, many of the teachers do like to see what the students are doing, so we're now using iTalk. It's a piece of open source software that allows teachers to monitor what the students are doing on their desktops, and can actually take control of the student's computer and pass it off, ENC based, but it allows them to view all 30 computers at one time, and thumbnails on their computer. So the desks work very well. They make a classroom very efficient. Most of the teachers who have them will tell you that they've never had so much room in their classrooms. They think it's going to be much more crowded, but when these desks are actually put in place, the classroom appears much larger.
Well, Mike, would you say the name of that program again?
iTalk is the program. Actually, one of our local schools had a request from teachers, and he discovered this on the web. It is a program written in Germany All of the comments in the code and the manual were in German. So we located someone, or he did, I should say.
He did.
To translate this into English and to go in and make the tweaks that were necessary in the code so that now we have an English version of iTalk, and it works.
Yeah, he happened to have 2 of his 5 teachers were first-year teachers.
How do you spell that?
It's ITALC. It stands for Intelligent Teaching and Learning with Computers. It's available for Linux networks, currently only Linux. And it's especially developed for working with computers in schools.
Mike, have you continued to work with multiple distributions? Are you settling on one? What's the status of that approach?
We're still working with multiple distributions, and I would hope that we continue to. We've had multiple opportunities, to actually settle on one or have one customed for the Indiana Access Program. But we pretty much have been there, done that, and we truly believe that the competition, we truly believe that getting these companies working together toward a common goal is not only good for open source, it's good for the marketplace. It's going to help them all to understand what the requirements are in K-12, and the requirements in K-12 can be different from what they are in the commercial sector. So having these companies competing to come up with a quality product is really superb, and we've had great response from Novell. Novell has been marvelous. We use Linspire in some sites. They have worked with us very closely. Red Hat is now coming in. We have Ubuntu applications that are in one high school. So being able to pull all of these together, it kind of demystifies a little bit of the Linux issue, because some of the people say, well, gee, there's so many distros out there of Linux. Who in the world can keep track of it, and who cares? The point is they all work. We're finding not a lot of difference. The new SUSE Linux Enterprise Desktop 10, which fully integrates the graphics package, is going to make a huge difference, I think. But I expect that Red Hat and Ubuntu and everyone else will pick that up very, very, very quickly. Pick up the XGL capabilities that are a part of that package distribution. So, all of these things help. We pull this together. We keep the competition high. We let them focus on what's important, and that is making applications run on their software distribution.
And from a school perspective, allowing the schools to choose brings their ownership level to a different, a different level. I hate to use the same word twice, but they do feel connected to the one they chose because they see it serving their purposes, and we want to allow schools, as much flexibility as we can to pick what serves their needs best.
So I'm interested, just because of the technical side, and there probably will be those who want to know as well. Mike, have you continued with the sort of streaming of the distribution down to the workstation through Ardent? Has that technology continued to be effective for you?
Well, Ardent is one of the models that we're using. Ardent is not the only model. Some of the people have self-contained units with hard drives and fully loaded kernels. We have Ardents working in 2 school locations, and others are considering it right now. We're looking, as you know, Steve, at other LTSP models, because, as I said in the beginning, this is a cost-controlled model. And if we can drive costs even lower, we're interested in doing so. If we can allow schools to use old hardware that they would otherwise dispose of, in a Linux terminal server environment, we're more than happy to do that.
Well, I'm a big fan of that.
I know. And that's good. That's good. It works.
So what would you say, we're getting close to the end here, what would you say has been your favorite success story?
Wow, there have been so many, actually. I think going back to year one, I would have to say the one that had the most impact on me and that probably kept me excited about pursuing this opportunity is from one of our first-year teachers and our first-year pilots. And at the end of the year, she had only had the opportunity to use the computers for a semester and had used Criterion and had started letting her students write on a daily basis instead of once a week. She told me she became a teacher. She said, I went to college. She said I was idealistic, and I became a teacher because I wanted to find a way to help kids unlock what was in their brains, what was in their minds, to help them structure it, put it down on paper, write it so that others could share in the excitement and the knowledge. And she said, up until now, over 22 years of teaching, I believe it was, said my daily existence in the classroom has basically been correcting spellings, basic grammar, and turning papers with red marks back to kids. She said with the computers, with their ability to write more, and with some structured learning like Criterion or Vantage Learning offers, for the first time in my career, I've been able to help students express themselves. She said it has been more than worth it. So when you look at that kind of commitment on the part of a teacher and that kind of excitement, if we had a pill, Steve, that we could give all teachers to make them more excited about coming to school and teaching the class every day, we would find better education. We would find more engagement on the part of the students, teachers, staff, and everybody. Indiana Access has helped that to happen, and that alone is exciting.
Laura, how about you?
Well, as Mike was talking, I was thinking I have a couple, but I think my favorite was there's a project that I had working with a school on the west side of the state, and a tremendous English teacher. The kids waited to get in her class. She was wonderful. She was getting ready to retire. We put in some in-access classrooms, and I saw her at a conference over the summer, and I said, so are you enjoying retirement? And she said, I'm not retiring. She goes, I got one of those classrooms. She goes, I'm staying at least another 5 years. And I can't even imagine how, the fact that she's such a great teacher, she's so engaged, and I would only see her when she could use technology that once a week in the lab. I'll be out in her classroom this fall. But that's the type of stuff. I've been hearing from a lot of teachers that it's changing their approach to teaching, and that's quality instruction is what we're all about. And this program is giving them the tools to make that happen.
Well, I have to tell you, it's really been exciting for me just to listen to you both, and I'm really appreciative of the time. We have tried to make a commitment to keeping these sessions to 55 minutes so that they're easily listened to, and I want to thank you for communicating so well and effectively, and I do feel very excited about everything that's taking place there. For those that are listening, I want to make sure that you know that next Thursday, August 17th, Michelle Moore will be on speaking about Moodle. And on Thursday, August 24th, we'll have Victoria Davis from Westwood Schools and Adam Fry from Wikispaces talking about the use of wikis in education. And then on Thursday, August 31st, we'll have Ruth Lutz and Raghavan from HP talking about the basics of open source licensing. Mike and Laura, thanks so much for being on.
Thank you for the opportunity, Steve.
Yes, thanks.